The former British Prime Minister Tony Blair is appearing before the Leveson media ethics inquiry. He's been asked about his close relationship with Rupert Murdoch and the general influence of the media on politicians. And Mr Blair has also been the target of a major security scare. Joining us now from our London studio is Europe correspondent Philip Williams. G'day, Phil. Now, Tony Blair is the godfather of Rupert Murdoch's daughter Grace, so I guess it was always going to be a bit tricky for him to argue that his relationship with Rupert Murdoch wasn't so-called cosy.
Yes, and he does address that. He said that that sort of relationship developed after he left office, not during office. And he was at pains to put distance between him and Rupert Murdoch during the time he was in office, and said that there was no cosy relationship, there was no deal done, as has been often repeated, before he was voted in 97. Many people have often speculated that there was a deal whereby he would get support from Murdoch in return for light touch regulation on Murdoch's media empire. He said there was nothing of the sort. He completely denied it.
Now, counsel for the inquiry actually raised Tony Blair's trip to Hayman Island back in 1995, in which Paul Keating gave him a pretty blunt assessment of Rupert Murdoch. What did Mr Blair have to say about that?
Yes, well, the blunt assessment was that Rupert Murdoch was allegedly, and this is just quotes, a big bad bastard, and you had to be a big bad bastard back to earn his respect. He was a bit dismissive of that, saying it was a fairly sort of crude assessment. He thought there was a bit more to it than that. But what he did was defend his position in going there in the first place, often attacked. He said, yes, I went there. Yes, I went there to basically get their support. At the very least, he said, he wanted to make sure that they weren't going to be against him in the upcoming election, which he subsequently won. And at the best outcome for him would have been if he got their actual tacit support. And that he did. He got the absolute support from the Sun newspaper, which he clearly identified as a very important part of his election victory. So he's quite unabashed about going to Hayman Island, asking for that support and getting it.
Now, this inquiry has really made all politicians on all sides look pretty bad when it comes to their relationships with the Murdoch press. Now, given the pressures on Tony Blair and all the others from the media empires, the political pressures they were getting there, how did he explain not acting while he had the chance?
Well, very simply, he said we had more important things to do. And after 4 terms out of government in opposition, he said there were important reforms in education and the economy, all facets of British life. He said he wanted to act on, and if he'd taken on the media, if he'd taken on Murdoch, that would have completely dominated his time and his efforts, and he didn't want to be blocked in that sense and bring government to paralysis when there were much more important things to do. Now, we're going to hear a little bit from him about that in a second, but first of all, here's a little of what happened when a protester managed to interrupt proceedings.
Excuse me, this man should be arrested for war crimes. JP Morgan paid him off for the Iraq War. 3 months after we invaded Iraq, they held up the Iraq Bank for $20 billion. He was then paid $6 million every year and still is from JP Morgan 6 months after he left office. The man is a war criminal.
Part of the difficulty, actually, with modern politics, and I'd say this not as a criticism of the media, is that my experience of the reporting of these events is that you can have 1,000 people in a room and someone gets up and shouts or throws something, that's the news. The other 999 might as well not have bothered turning up. But anyway, I, as I say, took a strategic decision. This was not an issue that I was going to take on.
Now, Philip, can we first address what we just saw, that extraordinary event of the person heckling Tony Blair? That room is virtually impossible to get into unless you're an invited member of the press. It's certainly not a free-for-all. Is there any sense of how that man got into the room?
No, Lord Leveson has ordered an immediate inquiry. He was clearly furious with how this man could have possibly got in. He came through the judge's entrance. It's the exact entrance that he would have used. So it's come through the back way there. Clearly a security breach, a serious one, because who knows? Imagine if the man had been carrying a gun or worse. It could have been a very, very serious incident. Follows on from the Murdoch appearance before the Senate, before the government inquiry, where he ended up with a pie in the face. You'd think security, especially with the Olympics coming up, would be extremely tight. It's a grave embarrassment to all involved in security, and it could have been a whole lot worse, of course.
Phil, finally, Tony Blair gave us his assessment of why he didn't act while he was in government or indeed in opposition. Did he offer any opinions about whether he thought things should be changed now, given what we know today?
Yes, he did, and he said what he basically said was there's a time for everything. There are political opportunities, and I guess he's referring to the hacking inquiry that's basically created this opportunity to reform things. He says now is the time to act. That he couldn't do things during his time in office, but now is the time to change that relationship, that crucial relationship between politics and the media.
Philip Williams in London, thank you so much.